payment space is very interesting. Things are running so fast that you can barely keep up. Having a good communication strategy, both internal and external, is key to success. I have introduced the 5 W's and an H at Cardlay. So it is what, who, why, where, when, and how. You have probably experienced it yourself, but because it runs so fast in an organization, then I think it's important to control that information. I think sometimes there's so many things that could be avoided if we were just paying a little more attention to the way that we communicate. The whole storytelling about what you actually solve for your customers and how you solve it, and that whole branding aspect of a brand is actually what can also set brands apart. We're not just building things based on assumptions, but that we are actually building things based on need. Okay, so let me rephrase it like this.
Welcome to the Pantrium Podcast. Here, there's no fluff and no sales pitches, just real conversations. I'm your host, Kristensen, and at Pantrium, we bring together bold and curious founders and leaders to share their stories, their lessons they have learned, and the hard truth behind their success. We are all about challenging the status quo and explore fresh perspectives while focusing on what really matters: people. If you're craving deeper conversations, you're in the right space. So let's dive in. Mette, thank you so much for being part of the Pantrium Podcast. I am so thrilled to have you here, and I am looking forward to hearing much more about you. Before we dive deep into the topics, I asked all guests prior to the podcast to introduce themselves with a fun fact. So, Mette, what's your fun fact?
I believe my fun fact is my passion for Christmas. Now we're almost there. I love Christmas deep inside my bones. It's my guilty pleasure. I love everything about Christmas.
I love it. Tell me more. What exactly about Christmas is it that you love so much?
I think it's the whole atmosphere. It's the extra coziness that we all bring into our homes. It's the lights. It's the family time that you get to have extra of in the Christmas. And I just think it's just such a lovely holiday.
I'm sure others are thinking about this. Do you love the whole hassle of shopping? And now we have Cyber and Black and whatever other Fridays and hectic purchase season. Do you enjoy that part of it as well?
I'm a huge planner, so of course I enjoy planning everything and figuring out what present needs to go to who and what is their wish list. And I really enjoy it. I love to go out in like a mall and check out all the lovely Christmas decorations and go gift shopping.
Nice.
So yes, love it all.
It is quite cozy, isn't it?
I think it is.
Speaking of shopping and purchasing and planning, it leads me into what you do at Cardlay. Can you please explain to our listeners what problem is it that Cardlay solves for your customers?
Yes. So Cardlay is a white label spend management front-end solution. What we want to do is make cards, payments, and expenses easy for businesses to handle. Okay, so let me rephrase it like this. We want to make cards, payments, and expenses easier for businesses, meaning that when you do a purchase with your business card, you want to have that post experience as easy as possible so that you get your transaction right into your phone. You have an app where you can do all your expense handling. You have a web portal where your administrator can set the right controls and make it easy for the businesses to keep an overview of all cards, payments, and expenses. I hope that was a bit more non-business described.
Good. And I think that's what we're trying to do at Pantrium, right? Get to the root of what is it that we all serve our customers with and help their everyday life to be just that bit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mette, I'm curious, what has been some of the biggest learnings through your career journey?
I think actually the whole entering the fintech space, it was not at all meant for me to be in fintech. I was in commercial real estate before entering fintech. Sometimes you just meet people that you have a certain chemistry with. I happen to have that with one of my former colleagues, and he opened up the way into fintech for me. After my maternity leave with my second child, I entered the industry of fintech.
What was it with fintech that got you hooked?
I think the whole payment space is very interesting. And I think because there are so many areas of fintech that are new and upcoming, and we are all looking for more digital solutions, the whole journey that fintech is on right now is very exciting. Things are running so fast that you can barely keep up. So yeah, there are so many areas of fintechs that is actually super interesting.
You came from real estate. Can you reflect back on your previous role and early career aspects from other sectors that you can actually also implement, or previous experiences into your current role in fintech?
I think there will always be part of your network that you can continue to have depending on what industry you're looking for to work in. So there are definitely aspects that I have brought onto my role here where I am right now. But I don't think it's like non-comparable in terms of the way we work. It's very different. And so yeah, a part of it I can bring into my new role, but there's also a lot of things that are just completely different. FinTech, the whole industry, everything is happening so fast, and the development accelerated during the pandemic. I feel like that whole thing makes things go way faster in FinTech, and that just requires other processes than you would have in other, I would say, not so accelerated areas of industries.
What is the biggest challenge?
I would say communication. As everyone else, I am a strong and a firm believer in good communication. It's one of the most underestimated fields because it is so important. We keep seeing that having a good communication strategy, both internal and external, is key to success. My big passion is to make sure that communication is on point all the time.
What's your processes around that to make sure it's on point?
So I have introduced the 5 Ws and an H at Cardlay. So it is what, who, why, where, when, and how. It's a tool that you can use to make sure that you are navigating correctly through that message. Make sure that you are completely on target and that this message is targeted towards the right group of people. It has the right messaging. It also answers all of those questions that sometimes are left out. For example, if you do a company announcement, make sure that you have covered what is the expected outcome of this. What do I want the target group to feel like when they heard this? Have I answered like how is this thing that's going to be communicated? How does it influence different parts of the businesses? Who is it for? When is it happening? How is it happening? So I've introduced that to Cardlay because I think it's such a nice tool to have just to make sure that you have your announcement, just that you have answered all these questions before you actually do the announcement or write the email or whatever you're doing in terms of content. I actually think it works pretty well. It forces everyone to ask those questions before they send out any piece of content, whether it's an email, if it's like a company-wide announcement, that you make sure that your message is on point and that you have already cleared the question that could come following that message.
Nice. And can you give an example of where you saw that it really did help with being clear and the message landed correctly and there was consistency because of this framework?
So we had a senior executive that wanted to do a company-wide announcement. He was very excited about this announcement and he did the announcement and he expected the group of listeners to feel excited and be filled with new energy, but actually the opposite happened. the employees who heard this announcement ended up feeling super anxious and worried for the future because these questions were not answered in the announcement. So the whole targeting of that announcement were probably a bit more external than internal focused, meaning that instead of having the expected reaction, they got the opposite.
And you talk about that this is both from an internal perspective as external, and the example you shared here for an internal perspective. Do you see the purpose or the use of the framework varies from being an internal message versus an external?
Yes, I think it's always a good idea to have these answered, whether it's an internal or an external piece of content. But I do think it varies in terms of if you do something external, then that target group may or may not be a bit wider than your internal target groups. I think in terms of internal communication, there are so many different groups of people in an organization. People have a tendency to receive information in different ways. I think it's more important to clarify these things internally. Then I would see the need to have the exact same questions answered for an external communication part.
What is good communication for you?
For me, I would say that the whole thing about being transparent when you can. I know that there are always information that is not supposed to be widely shared in an organization, but I also think it is important to control the communication. You have probably experienced it yourself, but gossip runs so fast in an organization. Then I think it's important to control that information about new employees, new things in the company, new partnerships. I think it's important to control that information. Good communication is structured, well targeted, and contains enough information without overloading people you're speaking to with too much details. So I think it's always like a balance of just, I would say, evaluating what audience are you speaking to. Is it a 500 people company or 20 people, or who are you speaking to? And what is the level of details that these people might want to have? And what level of detail can you give them? So I don't think there is a unified way to do it or a correctly way to do it every time that you can just apply to something else. I think that you have to evaluate each time you do a new communication, that you need to figure out what is the right amount of detail and who is the audience for this message. These are just the most basic communication that should be done in everything that we do. And I think sometimes there's so many things that could be avoided if we were just paying a little more attention to the way that we communicate.
How important do you see internal advocacy to a company?
Extremely important. Basically, it's the only, I would say, honest source of the truth that you can get. That's from the employees itself. It can help a company grow way faster and way better if you have the right employee advocacy. It can also help build your brand in another way. It can add different layers to your brand that no other name can ever do.
Can you give some examples of where storytelling and perhaps also that employee advocacy played a vital role in the commercial growth of an organization?
Yes, I have a few examples, especially from Cardlay. At some point, we opened up an office in the Dominican Republic, and we opened up a smaller office with mainly developers. The only way that we were able to recruit new developers were through employee advocacy. We could not just go out and find them through job portals or advertisement. It just didn't work. The only way that we could actually find the right people were through employee advocacy. So I think that it can make a huge difference. I also think it plays a crucial role in terms of culture and the way that we are building on that every time we go to work, the way we feel when we come to work. I feel like it's just such a big part of an organization, and I think it's very important. And I just think that if it comes from the employees, it just makes it so much more honest, and I think it's way more effective.
And as a marketeer and a communicator, what would you say the role of storytelling has for the industry, for fintechs as a whole?
I think it plays a crucial role. there are a lot of fintechs and there are a lot of different players in the whole fintech industry. We all want to have a big company and we want to have success. The whole storytelling about what you actually solve for your customers and how you solve it, and that whole branding aspect of a brand is actually what can also set brands apart. I think it's very crucial. And I don't think that you would ever be a success without having a great storytelling.
And how does customers play into identifying on unwrapping that storytelling?
I think because customers can verify that whole story that you're trying to tell and like where you're are adding value to those specific customers, I think that they can help just also through like testimonials and customer success stories and client stories and stuff like that that can help verify your brand and verify what you do.
For others who are heading up marketing and public relations, what would you give them as key advice?
I would say stay true to your work. And I would definitely say also invest in the people that you work with. Don't be one of those who are invisible in the office. Like be there, interact with people, connect with people on a personal level. Because for me, that's really what makes a difference. I don't believe that we can have a super great work relationship with colleagues if we don't really know them and if we're not connected with them on a personal level. So I would say, stay true to your word and invest in the people that you work with.
That's a very good rule of thumb, I think, in general. Now there's also this whole aspect of remote working or hybrid. Have you worked in such environments?
I have actually worked in both. Before the pandemic, I came to the office every day from 9 to 5, and that was just how we did it. And that at that time, that felt completely normal. Then the pandemic came and everyone was forced to work at home. I happened to be on a maternity leave at the same time also. For me to return to working was quite a big, like a new experience for me because I have only tried to work at home like every once in a while. And that was only like very rare. Whereas now, because of the pandemic, everyone and especially leaders were forced to rethink our thoughts around like usually I've just heard so many people saying that if you work from home, oh, so you're not really doing anything. I just think that is one of the biggest mistakes ever around like remote working. Also, what a lot of like different surveys have shown is that people are way more effective when you just give them the freedom to choose when to work and where to work. And I think it's a balance because, of course, you also want to connect personally with your employees and you want to make sure that you know who they are and what they do and all of that. But I think it's a balance between having some options. So maybe you have, I would say, 2 days at the office at least during a week, and then leave it up to people when they want to go to the office and when they want to stay at home, as long as they participate in the meetings required.
How do you balance that in your own team? Because I know there's a lot of discussions out there as well post-pandemic. How do we also now bring people back to the office? Because we are so used to being fully remote, or the majority of our time would be spent in our home offices. How do you facilitate that people come in and you still have that building up that relationship in the office as well as outside the office?
For our team, we have tried to set some rules around like what days we are there together to make sure that we maximize the time that we have. So right now we have a balance of 3 days at the office and usually 2 days at home, and the rest of the team are doing the same. And then we usually choose the same day so that we are sure that when we are there, all of us are there. There are some meetings that should be held in person and not just online. And so for us, we have balanced it this way. It may change in the future, but right now it works. And I think it's a good balance between both because I do also really enjoy home time myself. I think it's sometimes very nice to have just a break. We have an open office space, so there's a lot of noise and a lot of meetings. And I am quite a chattive person. I love to chat with people and connect with everyone at the office. That also requires some energy. And then it's wonderful when you can have some time at home to rebalance yourself, but also especially if you're having to write something, I just really some quiet time.
You spoke a lot about communications and the role of storytelling, as well as the role of that in the sphere of team building. What would you say has been some of the biggest learnings and takeaways for you as a leader when it comes to that transparency with your team and also navigating changes from, post-pandemic and through the pandemic? What has been some of the biggest learnings for you?
Again, clear communication. Practice what you preach and show the way. I feel like there are a lot of things where if you're just telling people what to do, but not showing the way or performing it yourself, then I don't think it's powerful at all. So I think it all comes down to clear and good communication. If you are transparent with what you can be transparent about, it makes a difference for a team. So they feel that they are being kept informed about important things, important directions, and important things that needs to be shared. For me, everything basically comes down to good communication. I think it is so crucial. And I just feel like if you're not leading the way, but if you're just telling people what to do, then you're not a good leader.
And as we talk about lead by example and inspiring leaders and be a leader that bring your team with you, who are inspiring you these days? Anyone that you look towards for inspiration?
I think that you and I are both part of a very lovely networking group with a whole bunch of female leaders in the MarCom space. Each of you is a great inspiration for my everyday work. We have so many great topics that we cover when we meet up. And I feel like I'm just giving a lot of new perspectives that I always can take home with me and just apply to my everyday life. And yeah, so I think any one of you are very inspirational.
And when we start looking towards the future, what do you think will change in the fintech space in the next coming 5 years?
I think that we will see more partnerships. I think that we are now starting to move over to a phase that we are accepting the fact that we cannot build everything ourselves and that it can make very good sense to partner up with the right people. So I think we will see more partnerships. I also think that we would see more B2B influencers. I feel like I start to see a lot more people using their space just as yourself that to try to add new angles and new perspective to the whole industry. Not necessarily only for fintech, but in general, I feel like the whole B2B influencer is growing pretty rapidly right now.
And if there's something that you think needs change, what would you love to see being changed in the industry?
I would love to see more events that are not just the average networking event. I think that we sometimes need a bit more, I would say, meaningful events for different parts of the value chain to meet up. I feel like we have a lot of fintech events where they try to cover the whole value chain, whereas I would like to see some smaller events that are more focused in each part of the value chain.
If you could do a wish list, which part of the value chain would you love to see first?
That's a good question. I think we actually also touched a bit about the event that you guys held. But I feel like the whole thing about paying more attention to the need and also bringing more UX research to what we do, I think that is something that needs to be applied throughout the whole industry. So we're not just building things based on assumptions, but that we are actually building things based on needs. So I feel like that kind of applies to the whole value chain. I cannot choose one that's like, we all need a little bit of change, right?
We can all do better in multiple facets, I suppose.
We can all do better. Yeah, definitely.
And the final question that I often ask our guests about is, which leader have made a big impression on you through your career?
I actually want to highlight our CEO right now, Kristensen. I think he is quite a personality, but his passion and his very innovative way of thinking is very inspirational because I feel like we are so different when it comes to our personalities. I am more practical and realistic, whereas he is just sometimes out in the future and he can just like vision things that I'm like, you can't even see that. It's so far away. How can you even imagine these things? But I just feel like he is so innovative in his mind. And I think that's very interesting to just be a part of. That's quite a journey.
Fantastic. It sounds like a fantastic journey. It has been a pleasure. I have gotten so many good nuggets out of this discussion, and it has been a really refreshing conversation. So thank you so much, Mette, for being part of the Pantrium Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor.
If this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really grateful if you could share this with your LinkedIn network. And to make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes, simply follow Pantrium wherever you are listening or watching. And just a note, the opinions and views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily represent the businesses they work for. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.